because the US and the UK, as we've just mentioned, has signed a tariff deal which will see lower charges for certain products for both countries.
We are going to build trading relationships with like-minded partners, reliable partners, partners that are aligned with our values.
$280 million in U.S. Treasuries just went live on XRP Ledger, and nobody's talking about it.
But the clock is ticking, and Ottawa is done playing nice with less than 30 days before a new trade deal must be reached. Canada has made it clear if Washington doesn't come to the table, a wave of targeted retaliatory tariffs will hit American exports selective, flexible, and sharp. At the same time, more than $36 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds have quietly been dumped by global economic players, including Canada, the EU, and key Asian markets. In just the past month, bond yields are climbing, the U.S. budget is under increasing strain, and now the pain isn't just coming from rivals, it's coming from America's closest partners. Canada, once seen as the calm, reliable neighbor, is signaling something new. It will no longer be held hostage by Donald Trump's tariff threats. This isn't just about taxes on steel or dairy. It's about a shift in power, and a warning that even America's oldest allies won't stay silent forever. We are the US's best customer. That wasn't a diplomatic pleasantry, it was a warning shot. Canadian Ambassador Kristen Hillman didn't mince words, and she didn't need to. Because here's the truth, most Americans overlook. Canada buys more goods from the US than China, Japan, and the UK combined. That includes everything from cars and aircraft to corn and steel. This isn't just about trade flows, it's Trump's tariff playbook. Backfires about lifelines for hundreds of US counties, especially across the Midwest, and the Rust Belt. Canadian demand is the only thing keeping factories running and jobs intact, and it goes further. Canada is the second largest foreign investor in the US economy. Canadian pensions help fund US infrastructure, Canadian utilities co-own American energy grids, Canadian banks underwrite housing and municipal bonds in over a dozen states. This isn't dependency, it's entanglement. But for too long, Washington acted as if leverage only flowed one way, that it could impose tariffs, demand concessions, and still count on Ottawa's quiet cooperation. That era is over. Because in 2025, Canada isn't just reacting, it's rebalancing quietly, strategically, and with precision, reducing exposure to US bonds, building new trade corridors with the EU, preparing retaliatory tariffs that hit swing state industries where it hurts most: agriculture, steel, and manufacturing. This is no longer a negotiation, it's a recalibration. And for Trump, and anyone else in DC, who still believes the myth that Canada needs America more than America needs Canada, this is the moment of reckoning, because the truth is now unavoidable. The US doesn't hold all the cards anymore. And in a world where even your closest allies start hedging against your leadership, what happens when you run out of friends willing to fund your future? Hey everybody, so back to yesterday's video regarding the US debt that Canada dumps US debt, $36 billion exit owns. So basically, like I told you guys yesterday, Canada owns roughly $328.7 billion of the American debt. From what we're understanding today, it's more like $400 billion of that debt that we own. Donald Trump sees tariffs as a weapon, and he doesn't hide it. Every trade threat is delivered like a campaign rally line. Every economic jab is choreographed for maximum political gain. It's a familiar playbook: punish allies publicly, then wait for them to crawl back to the table. But Canada isn't playing that game anymore. While Trump broadcasts his pressure tactics, Prime Minister Mark Carney is charting a quieter, more disciplined course, one that doesn't rely on media theatrics but on steady deadlines and behind-the-scenes leverage. Trump says tariffs are tools of strength. Carney doesn't argue, he simply sets a clock: July 21st. That's the deadline. Either Washington offers a new fair trade deal, or Ottawa will respond with carefully calibrated retaliatory tariffs aimed directly at swing state industries that helped elect Trump in the first place. This isn't about retaliation for show, it's retaliation by design. And it reflects two radically different worldviews. Trump wants to dominate the room. Carney wants to control the outcome. Trump demands loyalty. Carney demands logic, and right now that logic is hard to ignore. Canada is the US's biggest customer, one of its top investors, and now its most disciplined adversary in this chess match. Trump may be louder, but Carney just made the next move. We can give ourselves much more than any foreign government, including the United States, can ever take away. At the G7 summit in Canmore, Alberta, the cameras naturally gravitated toward Donald Trump, loud, provocative, and impossible to ignore. The former president did what he does best: turn a multilateral gathering into a one-man show. From calling European allies ungrateful to warning Asian partners, Trump made headlines. But while he performed for the cameras, someone else was quietly closing deals. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't dominate the headlines, but he dominated the room. While Trump sparred with NATO partners, Carney was behind closed doors, finalizing investment pledges. By the time the summit ended, Canada had secured new funding commitments from the European Union, Japan, and key partners. These weren't symbolic gestures, they were concrete pledges targeting clean energy, rare earth supply chains, and next-generation manufacturing. And this is the shift. Canada no longer needs to beg Washington. It's opening itself to the rest of the world. Carney's strategy isn't built on provocation. It's built on partnerships while Trump seeks applause. Carney is building alliances. One crafts sound bites, the other signs investment treaties. While Donald Trump stood at the G7 podium repeating familiar slogans, "America first, fair trade, not free trade," the Canadian government was already 10 steps ahead. Not with speeches, but with action behind the scenes. Prime Minister Mark Carney's team wasn't campaigning, they were preparing 7 days a week. Ottawa's task forces have been quietly drafting a flexible tariff response, one tailored not for headlines, but for impact, the goal to make sure that if Washington refuses to deal fairly, Canada won't just retaliate, it'll adapt at the same time. Canada is boosting domestic investment in strategic industries, battery technology, critical minerals, clean energy infrastructure. These aren't just economic sectors, they're shields, defenses against future American unpredictability. And perhaps most importantly, Carney's administration is accelerating efforts to redirect supply chains away from U.S. control. That means deeper trade ties with the EU, faster logistics corridors with Asia, and new infrastructure funding for ports and railways that don't pass through American territory. While Trump talks about leverage, Canada is building it quietly, methodically, without threats, but with full readiness. It's not a threat, it's a fact. That's how Canadian officials framed it. No shouting, no theatrics, just a deadline, July 21st. If no progress is made on trade negotiations by then, targeted retaliatory tariffs will be activated immediately, not as an act of revenge, but as a matter of policy. This isn't emotional diplomacy, it's measured economic defense. Canada's move is calculated, grounded in real trade data, and designed to protect industries that have been repeatedly targeted by U.S. tariff shocks: steel, aluminum, EV components, and agriculture. And it's not just Ottawa talking. Provincial governments, business councils, and labor unions have aligned on this front. Canada won't be a passive actor in a game of brinkmanship. If Washington wants to push, Ottawa is now fully prepared to push back with numbers, not noise for Trump. Ultimatums are part of the show for Carney, they're simply a point on the calendar. Donald Trump still believes delay is dominance, that by stretching out talks Canada will fold. It's a familiar tactic: stall the table, raise the pressure, and count on the other side to break first. But this time it's not working, because while Trump speaks in headlines, Prime Minister Mark Carney is building realities. The U.S. keeps repeating the same vague refrain: we want a fair deal. Yet weeks into the standoff, there's been no concrete offer, no written framework, no roadmap forward. In contrast, Carney's government has quietly prepared a full spectrum of responses: technical tariffs, provincial support mechanisms, trade route recalibrations. U.S. allies walk away from dollar dependence. Canada isn't waiting, it's planning across provincial capitals. Ministers are coordinating tax simulations and business outreach programs. Industry groups have been meeting daily, working with economists to model outcomes and adjust investments. Even supply chain contingencies are being activated, not in theory but in practice. And here's the paradox: Washington still thinks it's holding the steering wheel. But in reality, it's sitting in the passenger seat of a vehicle, already moving, one that's being driven by Canada, not the U.S. With every day of U.S. indecision, Carney's team gains credibility, not just at home, but among Canada's G7 partners. Confidence is shifting, the room is listening to a different voice, and as the July 21st deadline approaches, leverage doesn't come from dragging your feet, it comes from showing you're ready to walk away, and this time Canada really is. Mark Carney isn't bluffing. While Trump oscillates between threats and theatrics, Canada has quietly moved into a position of readiness that speaks louder than any ultimatum. This isn't about waiting on Washington anymore. It's about building insulation economically, politically, and diplomatically. Over the past 6 months, Carney's administration has fast-tracked infrastructure investments across key provinces, launched strategic partnerships with EU and Asian firms, and approved over $11 billion in new clean energy and logistics corridors that deliberately bypass American ports behind closed doors. Ottawa has held over 40 bilateral investment meetings since April, with German, Japanese, and Scandinavian delegations all seeking something the US no longer reliably offers long-term certainty. And while Trump focuses on TV ratings and polling optics, Canada is drawing the real power players. Japanese conglomerates are signing 15-year energy supply contracts. French agricultural buyers are locking in Canadian produce to sidestep US customs chaos. Even US companies fearing future retaliatory tariffs are discreetly shifting supply chains northward. What's unfolding isn't reaction, it's replacement. Canada is no longer a junior partner nervously awaiting orders from DC. It is reorienting itself as a sovereign economic hub, offering what the United States increasingly can't: predictability, strategic clarity, and a functioning alliance framework. So when Carney says we're prepared with or without a deal, it's not posturing, it's a reflection of months of deliberate strategy, because this time Canada isn't playing defense, it's playing the long game, and for America that should be the real warning shot. Trump speaks loudly. Carney moves quietly but decisively, while Trump throws threats to force a deal. Carney prepares for the possibility that there may never be one. The contrast couldn't be starker. One leads with noise, the other with strategy, and when the two finally stood across from each other in Kananaskis, it wasn't a handshake for the cameras, it was a showdown of political philosophies, of leadership itself. Trump, cornered by economic backlash and political instability, continues to gamble with tariffs, expecting others to blink first. But Carney, he didn't blink, he didn't bluster. He built while Trump chased headlines. Carney chased alternatives, diversifying trade, investing, and supply chain autonomy, and strengthening ties with allies who are tired of American unpredictability. What we witnessed at the G7 wasn't a policy disagreement, it was a turning point. A moment where one leader played politics and the other played history, because when the noise fades and the markets sober up, one question will remain: who would you rather bet your economy on, someone who threatens or someone who prepares? What do you think? Is Carney quietly leading the West's next strategic realignment? Or will Washington still force its way to the table? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for weekly deep dives into global economics and geopolitical power shifts.